I think the show has gotten to me a little bit. Hello, interwebs! I'm here to review the latest episode of Star Wars Andor Season 1, this time Episode 11, Daughters of Ferrix. And before we get into the review, I am sorry. Well, I'm not sorry. I think I look pretty badass in this outfit. But I know I feel a little bit extra for this review right now, considering what I'm wearing. I was actually recording another video for my main channel tonight, and I just thought that this outfit was so cool I'd record the review in it, because I don't want to take it off. I'm a trans woman. I want to be a cyberpunk warrior. What do you want from me? This is my final form in my transition. This is just how it goes. Given a long enough timeline, all trans women will eventually digivolve into this. Anywho, let's actually talk about Star Wars Andor. This was a solid episode, but definitely you can tell after like the big momentous moments of last week and the season finale coming next week, this is much more of a bridge episode, getting characters into position for what will presumably be a big moment. Next episode is all of our characters converge on the funeral of Marva as they try to capture or get in touch with Andor. So you can all see these pieces being put in place for that story. That's not to say that there aren't interesting moments being had here, but this is much more of a transitional episode between big tentpole moments of the series. And as such, it's a little less interesting than sort of those ones, but a certainly necessary piece. That being said, there are some wonderful things in this episode that I do need to talk about. Starting off with, we do get to learn that Marva did sadly pass away, and this has been kind of an interesting thing because I really loved Marva as a character earlier in the season. I forget the actor's name, but she's a wonderful actor that I've seen in many, many things. So it's a little bit weird that she's been very much off screen for her sort of death, like slow death that we've sort of been hearing about these last few episodes. I would have liked one more scene with her, and it kind of leads me to believing that she's not really dead, that there's some sort of play that she's making here, which is very, very possible. I think that still could be like the random like element that we all don't see coming in the season finale. But it also, given Andor sort of being this very complex show that doesn't necessarily rely on like big intertextual or surprise Star Warsian moments, could also be that she's just dead. And so just by the tone of the series, I could see her just being actually dead, and this is just it for her character, which sort of leads me into an interesting moment with next season, or next episode, I should say. But it just all kind of leaves me at this place of like, I wish we got to see a little bit more of her before she died, if this is in fact her final piece in this story. That being said, one of the things that I absolutely loved about this was B2 Emo, the droid. He's grieving for her, and everyone around him in the society, the people there, acknowledge him as a person and his grief and like let him grieve. And this is such a thing that you do not ever see in Star Wars, droids being treated as full human people. We've seen that they are sentient, and this has always been like an underlying problem within Star Wars of like, Star Wars droids are sentient people, and yet they are treated as slaves, and it's just sort of taken for granted that that's an okay thing because they are, droids. And so it's just like, oh, we're not going to deal with the implicit morality of that. And while this isn't addressing that sort of like slavery issue of droids head on in a very weird way that like Solo did, that movie has its own problems. I really like that the characters here treated B2MO as a real person. Like that moment where he's sort of sitting in Marva's house and he's like, I can't leave. I'm waiting for her. I want to see if she'll come back. And the guy's like, you can't stay here alone. And B2MO is like, stay with me. And the guy does. I'm like, oh my God. This is the cutest thing ever and the saddest thing ever. I adore it with all of my heart. Like, that was just absolutely wonderful. So I loved seeing that. And it's just a small, subtle thing that you just don't see in Star Wars that I loved seeing here. From here, though, once Marva dies, we get to see all the other characters that have been sort of looking for Andor and invested in this situation learn about this death. We see Sintra and the Imperial, like, undercover officer there, like, having a conversation without both knowing that they're spies for different sides talking to each other, which was kind of a fun little moment. But they both go and inform their contacts, with Sintra telling Vel, who then goes to Luthen to try to leverage this information to try and get into the inner circle by talking to his assistant, who is like, come on, you're not following the rules. You need to like pay attention. We have these rules for a reason. You see how important they take that, because it's very dangerous to be out in the open, especially on Coruscant, the Empire, and Vel is being very dangerous with this move. And one thing that like stuck out to me, and it's highlighted later in the episode, is that Vel's like, look, come on, I just gave Luthen Aldani. Like he owes me, and like I'm worth something to him. And it's very clear that she does not realize that to Luthen, everything is in service to the cause. He does not care about her as a person. It is all in service of getting the job done. And that is something that, as we saw last episode, is a kind of a fascistic impulse on Luthen's part, willing to be able to sacrifice people for this like ideology. But he said last episode he is condemned to use the tools of his enemies to get his job done. And this is an element of that. He does not see Vel as a full person, but just a cog in his ideological battle. And he needs to do that in order to win this fight. And that gets reinforced later on with Luthen going to Saw Gerrera and Saw becoming suspicious of the fact that like Luthen is aware that ISB is onto this Krieger guy, who I thought Krieger I guess is just another like dude who like works with Saw, and Luthen has his own cell. I thought he was Luthen, so they've been tracking this other guy that wasn't made explicitly clear in the show, so that's something you could talk about as well. But regardless, Luthen's willing to sacrifice this guy to protect his ISB agent that we saw last episode. And so this makes Saw suspicious because he thinks Luthen might actually be the ISB agent and like be trying to sacrifice him. But then like this wonderful escalation of Luthen being like, look, listen to me. This guy, my ISB agent, is more important than this guy's entire cell. And we are willing to sell him out to keep this information. But it also lets Saw realize that like Luthen might do this to him. And the only thing that keeps Luthen from doing that is that Saw knows him. If Saw gets captured, he would turn in Luthen. So Luthen will protect Saw because it benefits Luthen, not for any other reason. Which goes back to what we were talking about with Vel. Vel does not realize that for Luthen, she doesn't mean anything other than protect, like, her getting captured would maybe get him in trouble. So like he's willing to kill her. He would be willing to kill her if it meant saving himself because he views the cause as more important. So it's just I love how all of that stuff sort of dovetails, and like we also get to see Saw Gerrera's paranoia, which is something that we also see does tend to overrun him by the time of Rogue One. Like he is just a so broken man in that movie because he has been living in this very paranoid life for his entire life, and he just becomes broken by that. So I really did like seeing like elements of that paranoia coming out in Saw, because it is understandable to a degree that he constantly has to think that way, but it does leave you a broken person having to just constantly be in that state of anxiety and paranoia of those around you. So great scene there. We also get Deirdre, who is mostly just there to learn about the fact that Marva's having a funeral, and so she's going to use this as a moment to like put everyone in a box, as she says, in order to try and capture Andor if he comes back to see her funeral, which we do know is kind of hinted at that he will. One thing I did like about this scene, though, is we do learn a little bit about the funeral rites of the the Ferrix people. I forget the name of the planet. I think it's Ferrix people. And I love this idea that they make you into a brick and then put you in a wall, and that's such a it fits this like community-minded idea that the Andor has really been reinforcing, that the way to beat the Empire is through communal ideas and like building up like communal like people work together to build something stronger than ourselves, and that idea of someone dying and then become a part of the foundations of the society, like honoring your past by letting like people just become part of your present, your futures. It's such a beautiful idea that not only reinforces this specific culture, but the ideas of community and solidarity that Andor has continually been built up upon as a series. So I loved that as well, that small little detail. We also get Karn learning about Marva's death as well, in a funny little scene where he gets called back to called by the rent-a-cop guy from the earlier episodes of the series, which was just fun to see him. It was just like a bad connection Zoom call that he was on. It was just like having to deal with shitty Zoom calls is still a thing in the Empire. I guess capitalism of fascism still doesn't fix shitty Zoom calls, which actually that fits. Doesn't make a great product, just makes one that it can sell to you. But anyways, it was just a fun little comedic scene where Karn sort of learns about this information, so he's going to act out his own monomythic idea of being like, I'm gonna be the hero and take down Andor by myself, and thereby proving that I mean something, that I'm worth something, that I can live up to be the hero of my own story. His little like incel sort of idea going out there that he's going to enact violence on a personal level in order to sort of gain attention and pride for his mother. So that just interesting to see that little bit. We also get Vel and Mon Mothma. This is interesting to a degree, but it's a little bit reiterative because we have Mon Mothma telling Vel about kind of all the information that we've seen so far, and I like Vel getting in on this information, but Mon Mothma telling us this is just all information that we already knew. So I thought that they've been so good with some of the elegant ways that they've done Mon Mothma scenes this season that I thought this one was a little bit on the nose to a degree. So I didn't find this scene as fascinating. One thing I did find fascinating though was that Mon Mothma's daughter has very much fallen into their culture, and like even she went out of her way to like get into like her culture's religion, which is something that you do see happening with like people who are like immigrants and living in another country away from their own cultures, that the young people will sometimes want to reconnect with a culture that they don't feel a connection to, especially if their parents sort of reject it in some way, shape, or form. But that might mean that they go to some traditions that their parents or others might find problematic, like arranged marriages, which is something that Mon Mothma is very concerned about, considering the situations that she's in with this very nefarious dude who wants to marry off her daughter. So I like seeing that like little bit of nuance with Mon Mothma's daughter character. But overall, this storyline with her and Vel was just a little bit reiterative, just bringing Vel into the loop on it. Few other things really quickly here. We get to see Melshi and Andor escaping. It was a fun little beat. They ran into these two guys who they have like this like weird gooey net, which was interesting to see. And they're also no fans of the Empire. They sort of fuck with them a little bit and then help them get away to Nymos, where Andor is able to pick up his stuff that we saw at the end of last episode and contact Zan and learn of Marva's death. So that was a quick little scene that was really just like I like that stuff, but nothing of it was super great. One thing I did like though was the confirmation that only Melshi and Andor escaped. Out of all those people, everything they did, only 2 people escaped. And we do know Melshi appears later on in Rogue One as a character, so we do know he eventually continues to survive. But it goes back to what I said last episode, like you do all of this and it's still meaningful, it's still worthwhile, even if only 2 people survive, because they can go out and tell the story as Melshi wishes to do and maybe inspire others and let people know what's going on and maybe save others that way. But it is also very tragic, so it just goes back to the ideas reinforced at the end of last episode that only 2 of them possibly survived. Maybe others did, but only 2 of them got away despite everything that they went through. So yeah, that was a kind of sobering just detail to confirm, even though it was just hinted at last episode. Then the last little piece that we get this episode, which is also one that I was sort of like, okay on, was Luthen getting stopped by this patrol. It would have been interesting to be like, after all this paranoia that Luthen has, he's brought down by just a random patrol, and that's something that can very much happen in these sort of things. I thought that would have been interesting to me, but this scene just kind of felt like it was there to like add a little bit of attention and action at the end of this episode, which I don't think Andor really needs. I know there's some people out there that are arguing like, Andor's slow, I'm not really following it, I need it to be a little bit more action, which is fair. Like that's what you want your Star Wars to be. That I'm not shaming that at all. Totally cool. For me, I'm riveted in all the small stuff, and I don't need this like action except for in the moments where it makes sense, like the prison break, for example, or the heist. Like building to those moments and earning them really works for me. This didn't feel really earned; it just felt like something that happened to me. Now, if it does come back and there's ramifications for this later on, I'll be down for it. Whether this means like Luthen has like a tail on him or something, or people after him because of this, or he doesn't have the his ship isn't doing in good a shape for some reason. Like, there's ramification in this, I could be down with it, but as it stands, it felt like it just there to add a little bit of like action and spice to the ending of this episode, rather than being anything sort of necessary for the plot. So there was that. But beyond that, that's mostly all of my thoughts on this episode. I'm sure there's something I missed here or there, but yeah, this was much more of a bridge episode. Not my favorite of the season, and certainly ones that I have a little bit more criticisms of than I have other episodes of Andor. But as it stands, it is effectively just setting up the finale, and for that, I understand that it's not going to be one of the stronger episodes of the season. But what did you think of Star Wars Andor Episode 11? I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. What do you think of my outfit? I'm going to put these cool cyberpunky glasses back on, and with that, I will say, I hope you all, my friends, live long and prosper.